So hello everyone. Today we are on another show of Better Tech, where we are meeting another awesome CEO, Julia Salasky. Julia, did I pronounce your name correctly?
More or less.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm almost there. And today we'll talk about her journey, see what product she's running and how it's changing a particular industry. They're into legal tech, and we'll get to know more about her. So Julia, welcome on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't you take this initial time and help us tell us about yourself, and I mean, what's your journey like a founder? What had you been doing before that? What made you come over here, and so on?
Absolutely. So my name is Julia Salasky. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Legl. Tell us about myself. Well, I'm from the US originally, moved to the UK about 20 years ago. And I actually trained and qualified as a lawyer here in the UK. So I was at Linklaters, which is a big global firm. And then I left actually to go to the United Nations, where I worked for several years in different legal capacities. So doing war crimes, doing international trade law. And at some point, I realized that one of the problems I was solving in the UN capacity was actually a technology problem. We were trying to solve it from a technology angle at the UN, but I thought there was a different angle. So I left the UN to start my first business, Crowd Justice, to try and increase access to justice through the use of technology.
And it was how far back that started?
That was about 7 years ago. And through Crowd Justice, I came to a number of different learnings and realizations about both technology, about the way it can impact legal services, about the way it can impact law firms and the way that law firms deliver legal services. And so 3 years ago, I started my next company, my current company, Legl. So it's been a wild ride from law to startups, and yeah, now I feel very well versed both in terms of the journey of a founder from professional services, from legal services into developing products and creating real value for our users.
So as a lawyer, were you in a particular, area of the law? Were you in a corporate law or some IP law? What was your background as a lawyer?
Initially, I was a litigator, so a lot of court cases, basically.
Okay. And about this legal, it was something that your experience as a litigator that prompted you to think about how tech can solve the business. Some years back, we worked with one of the top 5 IP law firms, and when we went in and figured out that their docketing system needs a revamp, they found it themselves, and because they were spending time as they could save fast. So how did the product idea actually came to your mind?
So starting with what Legl does, what we do at Legl is try and digitize the back office, the operational aspects of a law firm. So the way that the legal industry works today, as you or maybe some of your listeners who've encountered law firms, who've dealt with lawyers, who've dealt with legal services know, is that the things that lawyers pride themselves on are delivery of really great advice. But what they do, maybe what they've been less well used to, is actually the ability to kind of service their clients in a way that's digital first, that sort of serves the needs of clients as they expect to be served in this digital world that we live in. And so what we do at Legl is we operationalize and digitize those back office processes so that from a client experience perspective, you actually feel like you're dealing with a modern business. And from a law firm perspective, some of these manual repetitive tasks that are actually in some respects very high risk, in other respects might really slow down cash flow, can be sped up to the benefit of your business. So the way that to answer your question, the way that I kind of came to this was actually through a series of different experiences. And in fact, my first business, we dealt with all of these law firms, and we started to see actually the way that they were engaging with their clients, the way that they were onboarding them, the way that they were collecting payment was clunky for the law firm, but also very clunky for the client. And so that was the original nugget of an idea. It was actually less from being within a law firm, but more from that journey through the legal ecosystem to where I am today.
So essentially, you were a subject matter expert at law firm, and you were looking at the frustration of potential frustration of your customers, the user experience, and you were trying to make it better, as well as kind of digitizing law firm. That's what I've understood, and that's where all this idea came up. So what you mentioned a couple of times that you kind of digitize the back office processes. What particular processes this product of yours takes care of?
Yeah, so Legl is a workflow-driven platform, and so one of the key things that we try and focus on are what are the processes the law firms have today that are really difficult for law firms and create a really bad client experience. And so those tend to be things like client onboarding. So if you've ever kind of instructed a law firm, engaged a law firm, it's there's a lot of back and forth emails. You have to provide a lot of documentation. Some of it's personal information. That can take ages before they can even start work, before you can even start to get legal advice. Compliance is a big part of that. So law firms are regulated businesses. They have stringent compliance obligations. So digitizing and automating some of that compliance work and making that really easy for the law firm, both to do that work, to audit that work, and also for the clients to undertake that in a way that's seamless. Things like payment, which is everything from actually collecting money into the client account, which is both from a law firm's perspective and a client's perspective, very critical part of your journey through the legal system, and also making it easier for clients to pay, things like payment plans, things like enabling clients to not get a PDF 6 months after some work has been completed, thinking about what this work has anything to do with, logging into their bank account, just making the whole process really streamlined and digitized.
Right. So so by the way, do you have a co-founder? You have a lawyer background. Did you try to look for it? Is it co-founder was more like tech savvy? Jumped right in. Did you raise any money for the startup? And for how long did you keep on building your product before launching it? Tell us about the initial experience.
The initial experience. So I'm a sole founder, and for all of the limitations of having a legal background, I've managed to be really lucky and through a combination, I guess, actually, of luck and making mistakes and iterating on them, to having an amazing executive team. So I have an extremely strong product, extremely strong commercial team, finance across our executive team. So complemented quite well there. Legal's about 3 years old. So we launched in October 2019, so a few months before the pandemic hit, actually. And we started off with a payments product because from my first business, we had deep expertise in the legal payments space. And so that's how we started. And we got our first customers, and we built out on this vision of operationalizing the way that the workflows throughout a firm can be digitized. And so that's how we started off.
How big is your customer base? And is there a particular size of a law firm that is more suited to be your customer? What is your ideal customer profile? What kind of law firms you sell into? And what is your customer? How big is your customer base right now?
So we're in about a couple hundred law firms in the UK, including 25 of the top 200 firms in the UK. Okay. So what we do through our product is, because it's focusing on back office processes, all law firms, regardless of size, have the same compliance obligations. They have the same customer obligations. And so we can service firms really of any size, and the product scales up and down depending on the size of the firm. What we're seeing is that for larger firms in particular, we can really partner with them on their journey to become more digital first. So that's where we're really focusing our efforts at the moment. And we think that there's a real opportunity both to be the kind of go-to digital back office for those firms, and also for firms who maybe are on the smaller side, they're growing, but they want to aspire to have that modern client operations experience.
So do you just provide the software or some service around it as well? Like, I mean, some lawyers also doing some kind of workflow management on that. I mean, like a lot of companies, the way they do bookkeeping outsourcing, they not only have a software, but also they provide some bookkeeper. So is this your model software focused, or it's software plus some professional service?
We're entirely software focused today. And actually one of the real benefits for our customers is that because the product's so easy to implement, they can build their own workflows to replicate their own processes completely seamlessly. So we really focus on enabling that very non-professional services approach in order that they can retain. One of the really interesting things about the legal industry is that although a lot of the processes are the same from firm to firm, each firm thinks they do things differently. They may well do things differently, but the workflows that we have are flexible enough that firms can build them themselves to replicate the processes that they go through today.
And how's your kind of pricing model works? Is it a SaaS model, pay per user, or it's a software installation? I mean, how it works?
Yeah, our model today is a SaaS and usage-based pricing model. So you can essentially pay as you go, but and scale up with as your customer base scales up. And we find that law firms really love that model. And a SaaS component for the kind of core functionality of the platform that underlies the transactional workflow usage.
So if I have to start using your product today, what kind of pricing I'm looking at to start with? Let's say I have like 30 lawyers practicing for me. Typically, what kind of pricing would it going to cost me to start with?
So it entirely depends on the firm itself. So it entirely depends on how much you're using the product. So it can be, some firms might start using us for a limited use case and then expand as they realize the utility of the product. So because the SaaS component is a really small fraction of the overall cost, we really have a lot of discipline around how do we demonstrate value, because when we demonstrate value, firms use the product more and their value grows for us as well. So it's entirely dependent on the firm itself.
Sounds good. And I mean, how so your product, I'm assuming, is continuously evolving. You are adding more and more use cases. Before we get to that, I ask a question which probably you missed that. Did you raise any funding initially, or you just fund it yourself?
Yeah, so we've raised a couple of rounds of venture funding. So we announced our last round earlier this year. We raised an $18 million Series B. Okay,
wonderful. And it means that you're consistently building out your product for more and more use cases. So eventually, is it fair to assume that you could be like a ERP for legal firms, or a Salesforce for legal firms with multiple clouds that can kind of serve various a lot of their needs? Will it be fair to assume that?
Absolutely. There's a lot of, I think one of the opportunities and challenges of this space is that there are so many areas that we would love to invest in, because everything from CRM to billing is not totally greenfield, but there's not a lot of very modern technology in this space. So we see a lot of opportunity throughout the whole operational stack. Absolutely.
So kind of what kind of your vision next 2-3 years, kind of your mission and vision for this product, where you see it like in 2-3 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, we are leaning into, and we would absolutely love to be that core digital backbone of business operations processes in the risk and compliance space, in the financial services and payment space. And underpinning that we see that the real value that we can provide is linking all of those processes together through workflows, providing really solid data infrastructure for the firms to capture value from those operational processes above and beyond the operational processes themselves.
Is it right now just UK focus, or is it available for other territories that can work there as well? Because other territories may have different compliance processes, as you have mentioned.
It's a great question. We're primarily in the UK today, but we have started expanding into Europe and testing different European geos.
Okay, all right. And what are are there any kind of competitors or big players in the field whom you are who could really disrupt this market, or as you mentioned, it's largely a greenfield, as still a very greenfield?
Yeah, over the last couple of years, law firms have started to adopt more technology, certainly than pre-pandemic. So we definitely see point solutions that have sprung up in different places. So in the compliance space, for example, there are certainly point solutions. And I think one of the hypotheses that we're leaning into around our overall vision for the next few years is that although you can solve a specific pain point at a law firm with a point solution, what's really valuable is being able to link these complex processes together and to not have to stitch together a million point solutions and have quite valuable data sort of dispersed throughout the organization. So in terms of this platform approach, whereby you link together these complex business processes and these high value business processes, so far we don't really see a direct competitor in that space.
Okay. So, if you have to tell, maybe our podcast is being heard by a few law firms as well. If you have to tell them something, that what kind of an ROI they can get just by implementing Legl, what would that be?
We see quite a few different components of ROI for a platform like ours. And one that's more intangible is around client experience. And even though it's intangible in the sense that you can't say that's worth £1 million a year to you, we see higher retention of client base. We see just great feedback for law firms of their client base. And that's something that law firms have started, and it is reasonably recent compared to other industries actually, but have really started to care about. And it makes sense, right? Because clients are one of law firms' biggest or only asset. The second thing is around, we significantly increase payment time, or decrease rather payment time. So improve cash flow significantly. And we can see that can free up literally millions of pounds on a law firm's balance sheet by being paid within a couple of days rather than 6 to 12 months. Another aspect that we drive is a lot of mitigation of risk around compliance activities. So one of the key value propositions that we have is mitigating some of the risk that law firms face around compliance and the work that involves, and the multiple stakeholders that involves, both within a firm and externally. Faster file opening time, so being able to get started on work much more quickly. Reducing debtor days. So we see that firms that work with us, their bad debt days go down quite significantly. So there's a huge number, because it's a platform and because there's a lot of processes that we're able to streamline and automate for firms, not just from an efficiency perspective, but really from a driving cash faster, driving revenue faster, giving clients a better experience. There's a huge wealth of opportunity to do things in a way that's business positive.
That's wonderful, Julia. So it seems like your product is right up there, as it can really be an industry disruptor in a few years to come. So, and you have raised your Series B, so I can see it is getting traction. You're expanding. So I feel that you're on a great path. So all the best wishes for your product and the company. And it's good to see someone disrupting new industries with digitization, because I guess every industry needs it. And the COVID has just accelerated that need a lot more. So thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks for having me.